Turn with me to the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 17, as we continue our journey through the book of Matthew and Jesus' journey toward Jerusalem. We know that as he's been going, he's been in the northern section. He's in Galilee. Galilee is a section which is the yellow section. And then Capernaum, or Capernaum, that's the way I grew up saying it, because that's the way Daddy said it, Capernaum, which is the hometown of Jesus. Jesus' own town, Capernaum. And that's where Peter, Andrew, James, and John were fishing there from Capernaum. And that city is right on the Sea of Galilee, and you just travel down, especially from where Peter's mother-in-law was, just a short 100 yards to the sea there. And so this is the area we are. They're journeying toward Jerusalem now. And I, when we talk about this, Jesus pays the tax. I was hoping this would come up in April, but we're a little bit later than that. But we are not dealing with the Roman government tax. We are dealing with the temple tax. And this was the tax on the Jews as we talk about the temple tax, and that's the tax that Jesus is talking about. Now, before we get to that, I don't want to overlook these scriptures. The mission of Jesus, verse 22 and 23, he plainly states, they abode in Galilee, up in that area around the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus said, the Son of Man shall be betrayed in the hands of men. They shall kill him, and on the third day he shall be raised again. He plainly states that. He stated it so much so that the disciples could not misunderstand it. And then whenever we get to the crucifixion and we get to the burial and we get to the third day, it is the Pharisees who tell Pilate, put a stone there, put guards there, make sure he does not come out of the grave. The disciples were very sorrowful at this announcement. They missed the mission of Jesus. Up from the grave he arose. What a great song that is. Up from the grave he arose. My little brother misunderstood some words. There were some different words than what you misunderstood. He always said they were trampling on his toes instead of triumphing over his foes. And so he just misunderstood those. And you get to reading that, and that's what it said. But the mission of Jesus is to rise from the grave. Our emphasis is on the cross. This is my blood shed for many. He shed his blood on the cross. This is my body offered upon the cross. But the cross would mean nothing without the resurrection. And so he will rise again the third day. On his mission, on his journey toward Jerusalem, after the transfiguration, where God from heaven, Jesus is declared to be the Son of God, hear ye him. He has two miracles. We talked last week about the first miracle. The miracle with the young boy being healed. He had epileptic seizures. He had a demon possessed. Jesus heals him. And now it is paying the taxes. We see about the who, what, when, where, why about the temple tax. This is not the tax as paid to the Roman government. That's another tax. They get their tax. But this is the temple tax. And so we talk about who? The tax collectors came to Peter. Wonder why they came to Peter. Why didn't they come to Matthew, who was a tax collector? Right. Didn't he come to Matthew and say, hey, does your Lord pay the temple tax? They didn't go to Matthew. They didn't go to Jesus. Wonder why they didn't go to Jesus and ask him, do you pay the tax? Many times we kind of sidestep also, don't we? And instead of directly going to the person that we need to go to ask the question, we ask someone else, well, why do they do this? Why do they don't do this? Maybe every time someone asked Jesus a question, he came back with the right response, and that didn't make the person who asked the question look good. Anyway, they went to Peter. Maybe it was just Peter that was walking by as they were collecting taxes, and maybe it's just an opportune time. Hey, Peter, you're here? I don't know why, but they asked Peter. What did they ask him? Does Jesus pay this tax? For some time, Jesus would pay this tax. I don't know if this was this particular tax collector in Capernaum asking this question. Maybe he didn't know about the other times whether Jesus paid it or not, but evidently Peter knew, yes, Jesus does pay this tax, and we do pay this tax. I've been around him for 3 years, and he pays this tax. Anyway, Peter knew he paid it. So when? The temple tax began after the giving of the Ten Commandments. That's Exodus chapter 20. In Exodus 30, they talk about the tabernacle and talking about the tax there. And it shall be a shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is about 20 gerahs, or a half a shekel shall be an offering to the Lord. I find it interesting that from the time of Moses to the time of Jesus, there was no increase in the tax. Our Congress hadn't read this part, have they? But it was a half shekel then, and it's half shekel at the time of Jesus also. And everyone that passed out that number from 20 years old, Jesus being over 20, he had been 33 years old, he had been eligible to pay this tax. Evidently, he had paid this tax because Peter knew that he paid this tax. But everyone from 20 years old shall give an offering unto the Lord. You're giving an offering. This is a shekel for the tabernacle, later to be the temple, and it is an offering to the Lord. In Nehemiah, whenever the temple was rebuilt, on Wednesday nights, if you've been here on Wednesday nights, we've been talking about sometime about the rebuilding of the temple. They paid a third part of the shekel for the service of the house of the Lord. So instead of a half shekel, it was a third part, but they paid this yearly. It seemed to be in Exodus 30 that it was only paid during the time of the census. The people were numbered, and then they paid the tax, half shekel. At the time of Nehemiah, it was a yearly tax, being a third shekel. And at the time of Jesus, it is half shekel. And so, but it goes to the temple. And when? It doesn't say in Scripture here when. So I'm not going from the book of Matthew, but if you go to commentaries, if you look it up online, when was the temple tax paid? They agree it's about 1 month before Passover. And this is in line with us on Jesus' journey toward Jerusalem. It's about now a month before Passover. He goes to Jerusalem during the time of Passover. And so he's going to spend a little bit more time in Galilee as he makes his way toward Jerusalem. About a month before Passover, they go out collecting the tax, getting ready for the feast of the Passover. They're in Capernaum, which is the northern part of the Sea of Galilee, the city of Peter, city of Jesus. In fact, Jesus calls, or scriptures state that Jesus says that this is my hometown, or they state that for that. It's for maintenance of the temple. And we have the tax being collected there. Does Jesus pay the tax? When they were come to Capernaum, they received tribute money. Those that received tribute money came to Peter. It says, does your master pay tribute? He said, yes. And when he was coming to his house, and we'll get to that here. 3 points on this: the problem, the providence, the provision. As we talk about this, the problem is a tax needs to be paid. And so they come to Peter, asking, does Jesus pay this tax? And he said, yes. We read later on that as the providence of God, in two ways. Peter's asked about the tax. He said, yes, he does pay tax. He goes to where Jesus is, and before he can say a word, you see who speaks first? Jesus speaks first. It says, when he came into the house, Jesus prevented him, or before he spoke, Jesus said, Simon, I want to ask you a question. When the king has taxes paid, do the king's son pay taxes, or is it from the people? And he said, well, it's from the people. And what is Jesus saying? He's saying the temple is my Father's house. In fact, Nehemiah would say it's the Father's house of the Lord. Being son, I'm exempt from paying that tax. And he was. And so he says to Peter, yet I'm going to pay it. I don't want to cause any trouble. I don't want any dispute about this. And so he says, Peter, go out and throw a hook into the sea. Peter was a fisherman, but when he was fishing, whenever Jesus came by and Peter, Andrew, James, and John were fishing, they were fishing with nets. They would take a net and throw it out and collect large number of fish. This was their livelihood. They didn't catch fish with the hook. That's how I fish. I fish with the hook, not with nets. I don't catch fish very often, but I go fishing very rarely either. Peter took the hook, threw it out there. He catches a fish. The providence of God, isn't it? This is a miracle. Of course it is. How many times you go out and catch fish with money in it? But Jesus says, go out, throw the hook. He throws a hook. Providence and miraculous miracle of God. A fish comes back, and he's got the provision. Lest we should offend them, go thou into the sea, cast a hook, take up the fish that first comes up, and when you open his mouth, you shall find a piece of money. Take that, give it unto them for me and you. The providence, the provision of God. I want to explore this just a little bit more. 3 observations, 3 lessons. Number 1, the world is watching, isn't it? Nevertheless, I don't know that I'm exempt from this tax. I'm the son. My father's the king. We understand I'm exempt from this tax, but nevertheless, because others are watching. Sometimes that's why we do what we do, because others are watching. In fact, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, as we are told to be a light into the world, let your light so shine among men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And so the world is watching Christians. Do you live the life that you say that you live? We know how Christians ought to live. The world knows how Christians ought to live. There's no doubt about the world understanding about the way that Christians ought to talk, or what they say and what they shouldn't say. And what you shouldn't say, have you ever said something and people from the world say, hey, I thought you were a Christian. You don't say that, or Christians don't say that. You don't talk that way. The world's watching. And nevertheless, not to again offense for anyone, he does what he does. Now, we let our light shine, don't we? And then number 2, the focus of spiritual and physical duties. The spiritual duty, I'm going down to Jerusalem. I'm going to the cross. I'll be betrayed by men. I'm going to give my life upon the cross. I'm going to shed my blood upon the cross. I'm going to pay the price for sin. The wages of sin is death. Romans 6, verse 23. And Jesus said, I'm going to the cross. There's my spiritual duties that I have. But along the way, doing our spiritual duties, we all have physical duties also, worldly duties. And he said, do you pay the tax or not? What does that have to do with going to heaven? What does that have to do with living the Christian life? We get caught up in spiritual things and worldly things. Don't let the worldly things of this world, the physical things of this world, keep our focus off of spiritual things. He's going to Jerusalem. He has his mission, but along the way he has certain duties also. You're living your life. You're going to heaven. But along the journey, we have certain responsibilities and duties here on this earth. Let's not neglect that part of our life either. And then the matter of rights. He said, Peter, does the son pay tax? He said, oh no, the king's son doesn't pay taxes. Everybody else pays taxes. And Jesus said, well, I have the right, paraphrasing here, I have the right not to pay tax. Did he pay it? Yes, he did. Well, people and their rights. I have this right or I have that right. It's my right to do this or say this, or not do this or not. Well, we are all about people's rights, aren't we? That's so prominent in today's society. It's my right. We could go on a whole sermon about rights. What people think they have or what people do have. As being a citizen of the United States, you have certain rights. You do. Being a Christian, you have certain rights, and you do. Just being a person alive, you have certain rights, and you do. We have these rights. And yet, as we talk about these rights, Paul talks about this. He didn't say, fight for your rights. That seems to be what's prominent today. This is what Paul said. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19 and following. Though I be free from all men, I've made myself a servant unto all that I may gain the more. Now think about this whenever you're talking about your rights. Separating the spiritual from the physical, the heavenly from the worldly. And Paul says, my main purpose in life is to gain the more. What do I say? I say, I want to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven and take as many people as possible with me. That's what Paul is saying, that I may gain the more. And so how are you going to do this? He said, unto the Jews I became a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law as under the law, that I may gain them that are under the law. To them that are without the law, as without the law, being not without law to God, but under the law of Christ, that I might gain them that are without the law. To the weak I became weak, that I may gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Jesus didn't dwell upon his responsibilities or exemption from responsibilities. He didn't go forth and say, well, Peter, this is what you go back and tell them. He said, this is the king's son, and he's exempt from taxes. He doesn't have to pay taxes. No, he said that he may not offend them. And he taught that to his disciples by example, not just word. and it came through to Paul also. I became all things to all men that I might by all means save some. So what do? We go back to the lessons from this. Why is it that Jesus paid the tax? It wasn't his obligation, but because the world's watching. Why is it that we do the things that we do as Christians? Why is it when someone slaps you on the cheek, you don't retaliate back, but you turn the other cheek? Why? That you may gain some. There's some things more important than retaliation. There are some things more important than revenge or getting them back. There are some things more important than saying, I'm going to win this argument. I've got every evidence on my side. I'm going to win. I'm going to put you in your place. Some things are more important than winning an argument, and it's winning a soul. There's some things more important in your family as yielding to one another, serving one another, because the world is watching. And in some, as the little poem says, you are the only Bible some people read. They might not pick this up and see what it means to be a Christian, but they're looking at you. And they know you're a Christian. And they know where you are this Sunday morning. You left out of your driveway, and they knew where you were going. You come here every Sunday. And the world watches, and the world knows. And because of that, it's not about us. It's about, can we gain one more soul to heaven? Keep our focus on the spiritual things and not the physical things of this world. Colossians chapter 3, verse 1 through 3 says that if you then been risen with Christ, seek those things that are above, the heavenly things. Not focus on the world. But things of the world come up, don't they? Pay the tax, not pay the tax. But the main thing, keep the main thing the main thing. Can we save one more soul? Is there anything that we can do to save one more soul? Is there anything that I can say, any influence that I have to save one more soul? That's our mission. He's about a month now from Jerusalem. He's going to the cross. He knows where he's headed. He knows his mission. And he knows he has just a few more weeks with his disciples trying to make the main thing the main thing. I'm going to leave it into your hands from here on out. How do you handle responsibilities and rights and privileges and that you were with the Son of God? And how do you handle that with other people? You're a Christian. How do you behave in the world? Jesus knows it's going to be in the disciples' hands in just a few weeks. He's going to be above, and he leaves his words with us. You carry on the mission. You go in to teach, and you baptize, and you continue to teach them to observe all things whatever I have commanded you. We could add in there whatever things I've shown you. Because he didn't command them to pay, but he showed them. Though I have the right to be exempt, I do it. As Paul said, that I may save some. Jesus going toward the cross. We'll pick up in Matthew chapter 18 next week. His journey toward the cross. We're going to spend quite a bit of time, because the Bible spends quite a bit of time of the last week of the life of Jesus. We've covered 3 years so far. The last moments. He's going to the cross. If you put up the invitation song, as we sing there, can you imagine Jesus in Pilate's hall? You can still go to the same place in Jerusalem today. It's called Pilate's Hall. You can know this area, if it was this stage area, that upon this area Pilate stood and Jesus stood. On our journey to Jerusalem, we went with several from here at Hampton. And as you're standing at Pilate's Hall, standing there, I went back and took a picture of them standing at Pilate's Hall. And I realized I'm standing where the people stood when they said, "Crucify him." I'm likely standing right where someone stood saying, "Crucify him." Where do we stand today? Because Jesus went to the cross, because he gave us an opportunity for life through his death. We remember that every Sunday as we partake of the Lord's Supper. But has it made a difference in your life? Has it changed your life? What will you do with Jesus? Will you make him your Lord, your Savior? Or is he just someone you read about in the Bible? Does he make a difference in your life? If he made a difference in your life, if he can, if you want to become a Christian, why not respond to the gospel invitation right now while we stand and while we sing?